question here is that we're not here to beat up teachers. We're not here to beat up anyone per se. I think the educational industrial complex, as I refer to it, has gotten so big that we're trying to defend a 19th century model of education in the 21st century. And I think what we need to be looking at is how is the status quo really working? And as Albert Einstein said, the real definition of insanity is to keep on doing what you're doing and expect a different answer. I'm looking forward to going forward and trying to first, number one, is if education is truly about the child, if it's really about the child, and I was told that since this is my 5th year in education committee, that is about the child, well then let's make it about the child. Please, that's all I'm asking. Because what I'm finding in this whole debate, it's not really about the child per se. It might be, but the arguments are more about the adults that work in the system rather than the system itself. So if education is truly about the child, let's make it about the child. And the other argument has been, well, we need to have parent involvement. Well, my question is this. If we're really looking for parent involvement in our children's education, and that's so important, it is. And it's not all public education's fault that the parents are not involved. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if we really want to make it about the child, but then and get parent involvement, what better way than allowing the parent to be involved in where they're sending their child to school? Because in so many instances, especially in some of the schools that I've toured, the fear that even to go to school is there, that the learning atmosphere is not there. And I look at education as a true cycle breaker. And I think that somewhere along the line, we can come up with a real solution by putting the child first and allowing the parents to have that choice. Because in America, we love choice. We can choose whether or not to even have a child. But we can't choose whether we want to send our children to school. And that, to me, no one has ever really been able to give me a really good answer outside the fact that, well, yes, well, you can choose to send them to private school, and yes, you can send them to here. You can move to a new district. Well, in a down economy, it's tough selling homes right now. So even if you want to sell your home, maybe you couldn't move, and such. And finally, I just think we need to start thinking outside the box in the 21st century as we're educating as we're getting our children ready to be competitive on an international market. So my emphasis on school choice isn't to destroy public education. I actually look at it a different way from Mike Folmer's position. I look at it as a way to help improve public education by giving public education, as it's set up right now, true competition. Because I think in that arena is where it's going to work, and for myself. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to allow our panelists again, as Representative Christiane. I'm sorry, please forgive me, I'm embarrassed. I should have known that, man. So.
New guy.
You're one of the new young Turks that came in, so congratulations and thank you for being there. And of course, Anastasia's here, and myself. So we'll open up for questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just how I got here. You know, I'm from outside of Pittsburgh in a suburban area where we have really good public schools. So why in the world am I, here in the 101st district, and proud to be my colleague representing Maureen Gingrich's district, and she apologized she couldn't be here, but she is working at another event. But so how did I get to Maureen's district to talk about this? Well, because before I got elected, I believe that parents will ultimately make the best decision for their son or daughter before a politician, before a teacher, before a grade superintendent. So why in the world would we not empower parents to have all the rights and privileges they have for every other aspect of their life? And why would we want them to make that decision? And at the end of the day, that's what I believe. The parents will make the best decision. And why should somebody that makes our salary, why should they be able to send their son or daughter to an alternative different school, whether it's Catholic, private, parochial? Why should they be able to, like a single mom in Philadelphia who's barely paying her rent payment, paying the bills, but she can't send her kid to get a Catholic education or a Jewish education, or how about just a safe education? Because you're right, Senator. A lot of times we're talking about schools that are proficient. 7% of the kids are proficient in reading or math. Graduation rates in the 30% in the really unsafe schools. The bottom 5% of public schools last year had over 5,000 violent incidents. Folks, you can turn your head and you can make every excuse why we shouldn't pass reform, but that's not going to fix the schools that are desperately broken. And I want to fix them. I don't want to pass the buck 15 years down the road. I don't want to lose another generation. I don't want more kids dropping out. You know, 66% of our inmates in Pennsylvania are high school dropouts. Our corrections budget is continually on the rise. So I'm not interested in just kicking the can down the road 15 more years.
Well, Anastasia, why don't you tell them how you got here?
Okay, my name is Anastasia Podolsky. I represent a grassroots organization called the Kitchen Table Patriots, and I'm also a field coordinator for Freedom Works here in Pennsylvania. And I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, 6th grade, 3rd grade, and preschool. So I'm right there with a lot of parents across our state. And I just want to commend these 2 representatives sitting beside me because they get it. And I think it's been a long time coming in our state that parents need the choice of where to send their kids to school. If my zip code is okay and my public schools are good, which they are, I'm lucky I have that choice. But there's families across this state that are not in that position. And so I really think that we have an opportunity to see some legislation with some good reforms get passed this fall. And we signed up with Freedom Works to help that process along. As far as our organization, it's a grassroots organization. And so we are ordinary citizens that stand for, you know, liberty, small government, and what we have here is a failing monopoly. And kids are trapped in these schools. And, you know, what fixes stuff in the private sector? You can see how competition works. So why should schools be any different? And so we believe that we can take these principles and hopefully get something done soon.
And real briefly also, I want to let you know something. The voucher issue here that we're talking about, and then also the EITC, these are not the magic bullets. This isn't the end of end all. This isn't going to be the final solution to bring reform in education. There are a number of things we need to be doing, and I think the school choice aspect is the first bullet, is the first finger on the hand. The next would be the ITC, the expansion of the ITC, so that parents can have the opportunity for scholarship to send their children to where they want to send their child to school. And then of course we have the public charter school system, which is actually public schools, but run without all the mandates. Now, I was told being on the education committee, and this probably, I'm going to bring this out because this kind of really hurt me to the nth degree. We worked really hard on the education committee. We met early, we met before we went back into session, we went and traveled throughout the state to try to put together a mandate relief package that would help our public schools, so that we want to make sure, if it's going to be competitive, we want to make sure all the schools, that everybody's competitive, that everybody has the same playing field, that is fair. So, but we got that shot down. I had a furlough bill, which I thought was put together. The original bill was very simple, that the school district allow my superintendents, allow those superintendents to run their districts as they see fit, and trust in them that they can do that. But that got neutered and got just totally so watered down that I backed off of I'll be honest with you, I backed off of it. So, you know, we were hoping that we'd have a complete mandate relief package. We were hoping that we'd have, and that got shot down. And so now I guess we're going to be looking at the new 3 school, and that's going to be the voucher, the ITC, and possibly the charter school scenario. So to help some of our schools we just moved a charter reform bill in our education committee. So of course those bills are still in discussion here in the fall, and we have a pretty full plate as we move forward. So I just wanted to say that. So let's open up for some questions here. Yes.
Opponents of the school choice and vouchers say we can't afford it. It's going to cost the taxpayers $1 billion. Do you want to address that? Address the cost? Is it going to cost, or is it going to take some money from local students?
No, first of all, it's not going to cost $1 billion. The participation rate is what drives that number. If we want to say that 30–40% of the kids are going to take a voucher to go to a private school, and that's going to take $10,000 per student, and that's going to drive up the cost. That's just not reality. Other states and cities that have vouchers don't show participation nearly that high. That's a quick answer to your question. But will this take money from your good public school and send it to Philadelphia, like $1 billion we already sent? No, and it will not, because that money would be going to the failing school district already at the tune of $13–15,000 per student, and a portion of that will be going to follow that student. So in my opinion, it's a shift of dollars. It's not a new allocation of dollars. So the answer to that question is no. I think right now with the budget crisis, people are using the numbers of this to scare people. When you look at $26 billion we spend on public education, we're talking about less than one fraction of 1% of the dollars that we're spending in public education. So to me, 15 years ago, Senator, they used that we need more money and more money and more money. Now they're saying that this fraction of 1% is what's going to take. They're going to try to use it to stop this. In my opinion, this bill should be discussed on the merits. The dollars are shifted dollars. I just think we're scared that.
Just a question about I thought people that are concerned that once they take dollars, it's all supposed to follow suit, once they take dollars, that eventually administrations change, legislators change, they'll be subject to the rules, just like I think the justification for looking at places like Penn State is when you get state dollars. Do you see that as a potential concern in terms of a religious school or appropriate school?
Well, right now, I think one of the myths out there is that our parochial schools and our private academies don't fall under the same requirements as far as educating our children. And I don't think that's totally true. I do believe that the federal government, from Washington, D.C., thrusting down upon the state government some unfunded mandates that they throw down upon us have helped amplify the problems that our public schools have been facing right now. And I would personally love to relieve all that. And if I was the guy in charge, and I'm not, if I was the guy in charge, my contribution from my districts would be, to the districts, would be in a pure block grant scenario, and allow them to plug in the money where they need to see fit without any strings attached, and allow my superintendents to be superintendents, and allow them to be superintendents to run their districts, and allow teachers to be teachers and such. But as far as the fear to the program, I don't, do you see the fear?
I don't. And when we're talking about accountability and transparency, what's more accountable than Anastasia deciding that her daughter or her son, she's picking that school, and if they're not meeting her level of expectations, she's choosing to send them there. There's nothing more accountable than that. And my question to them would be, what's accountable when you're spending $26 billion a year, and you got kids, you have schools that 7% of their kids are reading at grade level? What's accountable about that? What's accountable about the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia school district, having 500 employees making over $100,000 a year? What accountability is in that? So I'm not looking to take away the sovereignty of private schools because they get a fraction of 1%. I think they should remain private, and we should keep this in perspective of how much we're spending and what's more accountable than Anastasia choosing to send her son or daughter to school.
I would like to add, as far as some of the questions that I've heard is, well, if we don't have a failing school, why should we care? As far as some of the suburbs, and I call this the cul-de-sac conversation, where you point out what it costs our state overall, and people start to understand. They start to think about those kids in those schools. And another thing I have is, well, why isn't it helping everyone? Why can't we? It's not fair that once again, the suburbs are being left out of the equation. It's not benefiting me at all. And you have to look at the big picture, that if we can help a population of kids that could, potentially have a life that go completely off track, and down the road, those kids are going to be growing up and going out into the workforce, or going out and doing things that do not contribute to Pennsylvania. So I think that that's really what the discussion needs to be. And so to any of my neighbors, when I do talk about that, because I think sometimes we can live in a bubble, that seems to really, and I say, okay, so right now, we start here, we start with the most vulnerable kids. In Florida, they started with the most vulnerable kids, and they've had success, and they're able to build upon that. And that's what I'd like to see here in Pennsylvania. So if we can't get universal choice all at once, we can help the kids that are most.
And just to add to that, we need to do this in baby steps. There's no doubt about it, because it's something that cannot just happen radically, because boo-boos could happen, and there's things that we may have to change. There may have to shift. There may be some unintended consequences that, being finite human beings, we don't have that internal wisdom to be able to look out to see. I do remember this argument, though, being that I was a school choice advocate way back, going back into as soon as I was a parent. I remember when EITC came on board, the big clamor from education was, that's going to destroy public education. It's going to die. You're just going to take money away from it. It's going to fail and falter, and it's not going to be around anymore. It didn't happen. EITC is so popular now that even a governor in the last administration who was anti-EITC could not even suggest to get rid of it, because both Democrats and Republicans had so many constituents in their district that were in favor of EITC that it stayed there. So I believe as we move forward in baby steps, we build up a constituency of support, so that no matter what administration comes in, that support will be strong enough to maintain it, and as we go forward. Again, if it's about education, is about the child, then let's make it about the child.
And when EITC helps those suburban people too.
Exactly.
And that's another point.
Yeah, this is a two-prong approach. I mean, currently the EITC is going to a family making an average $29,000 a year. So the idea that these suburbs are getting a huge portion of this EITC pie is not accurate. So if we can give a voucher to the most vulnerable in the failing schools that meet poverty income requirements, and we supersize the EITC like the bill we passed in the House, that money is going to go to the other 67 counties and the other 500 school districts, or 490 school districts. I think it has to be a two-prong approach, because we have an EITC that is tremendously popular. The House passed a bill that completely supersized this EITC program. We had 190 votes, because 67 counties benefit. 203 legislative districts benefit from the EITC. That is a program that is wildly successful, and we should use that as the example of how you build incrementally. If we would have tried 10 years ago to put the EITC at $100 million and income eligibility at $100,000, it wouldn't have passed. But we allowed the program to succeed, and I think we have to remember that. I'd love to say that we could just pass universal vouchers for everybody and the money follows the kid, but that's not the reality. The reality is we have an EITC that's should be able to help the middle class, and the voucher help those that desperately, desperately.
And I think there's another thing here to be looking at, and again, and this is the perspective I come from. This isn't about to beat up on public education per se. I mean, this is about to help public education and those, but in those areas where public education is broken, and severely broken, and what that you talked about in the schools I visited in Philadelphia, like Universal City High School. I mean, right down the street from the University of Pennsylvania, one of the pillars of universities, you know, one of the Ivy League schools. You have a super failing, broken school where kids are afraid to go to school. So, I mean, those are the areas I think that we're looking at here. And such, and then other areas that we need to be doing to help our public schools to be able to compete. And I still would love to see mandate reliefs off the back of our public education people, because God love them. I mean, they're with their hands are locked. I mean, we throw these I hate unfunded mandates. I cannot explain to you how much I hate. If we're not going to fund it from the top down, we shouldn't be doing it at all. And we should allow our school districts to be the best they can be. And I think through the competition and so forth, I think that can happen.
Exactly how is it going to work between a parent and a school and choose a school? Say they want to send their child to a Catholic school. The parent first makes sure that the Catholic school is willing to take the child, and then the parent approaches state, PDE, whatever, and says, I want to send my child there, I want to give me a voucher, and the state will give a voucher to the parent, and then they'll take it to the school as payment. Exactly.
I actually think it's a direct payment. I think it's a direct payment.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not quite sure where we are now, because SB1 is no longer the vehicle. I was more familiar with SB1 than I was with anything else.
But it's going to be real similar. I mean, the process that she's asking about is going to be real similar to what we had with SB1.
Which
So
was
the money's going to go directly to the parent.
And then the school will be,
to a broker school,
No.
that's the Constitution.
but also to make sure there's going to be stopgaps so that the parent can then, you know, not take it, you know, go to the casino. Because, you know, there was concern that could happen, and there's going to be, you know, a process in place.
And the schools can choose whether or not they want to participate in the program. So let's say, you know, St. Michael's decides to participate, then they will take so many students in. So as long as there's room, there's availability, the parents will have to do the research, find the school they want to send their kid to, apply to that school, and then if they're participating in the program and there's availability, then the kid will go there. Right?
So Anna should be up here. But I think what Anna had just said was, you know, that you cannot not accept a child based on, you cannot take a child because they're good at a sport. It is a first come, first served basis. It's up to the school. So if the school has 5 slots, they have 5 slots. That's it. They can't pick and choose. It's a first come, first served.
Or the other alternative is a lottery type system.
Right, a lottery.
That if you have 10 spots and 15 applicants, then you literally have a lottery. I think the only, you know, in the House bill, the only exception to that is if you have a son or daughter already in that school, you would have priority over if you're trying to send your other son or daughter to that school. That was in the House bill, but that language is still a work in progress. But that's the example from the House language.
See, the other thing too that needs to be looked at is that the money that's coming for the vouchers is not coming from the taxpayer money from the school property taxes that everybody pays in their local districts. It's coming from the contribution from the general budget, which comes from sales taxes and whatever else that we put into the general, the revenues that we receive. Now, Nathan, I don't know if I have my figures right. Maybe you guys will come up to do on let's use Harrisburg as an example. What would be their state contribution?
It's about 10,000, about 17,000 expenses, about 7,000 property damage, about 10,000.
Okay. So let's say
Bishop McDevitt.
What's that?
If they go to Bishop McDevitt,
Yeah.
it's 5,700.
Yes.
About 5,700. So even though the state's giving them 10,000, our bill had it capped at the cost of tuition.
Is that
So the rest of that goes back.
The rest goes back to the district, plus the property tax money for a child that's not there to be educated. So that child is we're helping reduce the size of the classroom, number one. And number two, they're still receiving a significant amount of money to educate the rest of the children that are there, and focusing on how we can help improve that if that would happen.
And a very common criticism is, well, what are you going to do to the kids that are left behind? Well, they're actually, the per pupil spend of that public school is actually going to increase. Because if you're spending $10,700 per student in Harrisburg School District, and that one child leaves and it's only taking $5,700 with them, the rest of that money goes back to the kids that are staying in the classroom. So their per pupil spend actually increases, despite the fact that
Plus, they're helping to reduce the class sizes, which I hear is a common complaint. The class sizes are too big. So we're not only helping them increase their per cost per student to help to educate who's left behind, quote unquote left behind, we're also helping to help them single out and educate.
Every study has shown that not only does that student performance increase, but the public school performance also increases because competition makes them work harder. I don't know what else is going to change Philadelphia City School if they don't have competition.
Right.
Because it's not money and it's not time, but until there's a viable, and you can't say, well, they have a choice because they can pick up and move, because a single mom making $20,000 a year she can't even afford the U-Haul to move. So there's no real competition in Philadelphia. Now with charter schools, maybe some, but in my opinion, and I also hear people that vouchers aren't going to work, vouchers aren't going to work. Just what is going to work? I would love to hear an alternative, but at one time, an alternative to.
Well, and that's a very good point, Jim, because also, you hear, well, it's not going to work, but we're already spending a lot of money. We are spending a ton of money. Philadelphia makes up about 11% of the total student body of our public school education community. They get like, the last figure I saw, and it might be a year or a year and a half old, about 34% of the money is to do so. So we're already dumping so much money in that arena to get what?
And that's another cul-de-sac conversation I have. When you really break down the amount of money that, most of their money comes from the general fund, from the taxpayer. So we're all paying into that system. So how I look at it as a consumer is, I want to see a return on my investment. We're already paying for it. So let's have some competition. And when people say it's not going to work, state after state are implementing this exact legislation that we're trying to get here done in Pennsylvania, successful in Florida, successful in Louisiana. So it is working, and there's studies to prove that it works. So I don't understand why they're so resistant.
There's never been a study that shows it doesn't work.
Yeah. And back, Fred. And then you have...
How do you respond to people who say that this is unconstitutional? Specifically, Article 3, Section 15, public school money not available to sectarian schools. Article 3, Section 29, appropriations for public assistance, military service scholarships. And Article 3, Section 30, charitable and educational appropriations.
Well, I think the courts have dealt with that pretty clearly, and I will point to the FIA grants specifically. I mean, and to answer your question, I'm going to maybe broaden it a little bit. Why do you think students from all around the world come to the United States to go to our universities and colleges? We have a state system of schools that Pennsylvania takes care of, Millersville, that whole crew there, that whole line there. But we also have private colleges, we also have state relateds, we have competition. There's real competition there, and the FIA grants have even helped that. Personally speaking, not to get off subject, I would like to see get rid of those appropriations, what's that called, the non-prefers. Get that $750 million away from the big five and then put it all into FIA and allow and then expand the FIA grants to more students to allow them more choice. But the point is that we have competition in that arena. And FIA grants, there's tax dollars there. And they're going to Catholic universities, they're going to private universities, they're going all over the place. So, I mean, and secondly, the money, as I pointed out, the money that's being spent there is not coming from the school property taxes. It's coming from the general budget, which means general expenditures. And the money's going in the form of a voucher directly to the parent. The parent then is going to the institution that they decide to choose.
Can I just add two things about the FIA grants? FIA grants are a voucher for higher education. It is a taxpayer line item in the budget.
Yes.
That goes to reduce the cost of tuition for someone based on income eligibility. And you can take that taxpayer voucher, and what I say back home is, you can go to Geneva College where they talk about Jesus and read the Bible every single day, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with it if you do it for K through 12. And it's okay for the GI Bill for a soldier to do the exact same thing, to take that taxpayer-funded voucher and go to Geneva and learn about Jesus and read the Bible. And I'm okay with it. And the second part is, the Constitution says you can't raise money for that purpose. And we don't raise, I would believe that exactly what the senator said. If we were talking about property taxes for all of that student, we may lose a court challenge. But I feel pretty safe that we don't raise the sales tax for education purposes. We do decide to spend it on education, but that's not the point of raising it. And I think the constitutional issue, obviously it's going to be challenged in court, and I'm pretty comfortable that we're not wasting our time.
Well, I think there's so much case law in favor of the FIA grants and the GI bills and so forth that they would be pretty hard pressed to defeat it. And listen, I take my Constitution very seriously. It's in my coat pocket right now as we speak. And it's one of the reasons why I think we need to be looking at having a Citizens Constitutional Convention, except for Article 1. Article 1 is our Bill of Rights. But as we look into this, let's look in, how did Article 315 come in? When did it come into the Constitution of Pennsylvania? It came in 1877. And it came around, it was known as the Blaine Amendments, because they were fearful of the parochial Catholic schools. That's basically what that was all about. And they wanted to make sure that the Catholic schools weren't going to overrun, or well, I don't know what they were afraid of, but that's back then. But that's when at the convention of 1877, and I have a copy of that Constitution, and before 1877, you won't see those Article 315 and what you refer to. Those were known as the Blaine Amendments. That's why they were put in, and I think they seriously need to be looked at. Now, again, you know, that's not going to happen. I had to throw that out there.
Question I'd like to hear your info with the failure of education in the state is systemic. Why are the majority of family schools located around New York areas with a significant population of such students and earning questions?
Well, it's not an easy question to answer in the sense that the reality is the community is failing as well. But the one thing we can't do is not allow them to have an alternative if the school district is. And just to say that an inner city school is failing because it's an inner city school, there are schools that are inner city that do well. There's churches that do well. Not every church that's in inner city fails. So I think it's even more reason we should empower parents to get involved in their child's education, not just to kick John.
Let me answer that question now. Okay.
Because there's been a lot of conversation about empowering parents.
Sure.
My opinion, personal opinion, is if parents are not already involved in the life of their child, educational choice is not the brass ring that's going to make them get involved. They have to already want to be involved. It's the reason why, as you touched on, their communities are also failing because parental and family units are not involved.
I will
So
say.
I don't buy that the families are going to go, oh wow, the government said
Well,
I
but
should
let me put this. Let me answer that, and that's a very good point. But here's what how I'm going to answer it. I had the opportunity to visit the Mann School. I had the opportunity in Philadelphia, the worst section in North Philly. I thought I was driving through a DMZ zone, man. I mean, it was like bad, burnout cars. I mean, horrible. And here was this thriving charter school that was producing, and parents were excited about. So the same parents that were fearful of sending their kids to an unsafe scenario were thrilled. Lincoln Elementary, York, Pennsylvania, right here in South Central Pennsylvania. Before Lincoln Elementary was a public charter, brick and mortar public charter school, it was the worst performing elementary school in the York system, plain and simple. Those very same parents who, quote unquote, weren't involved in their kids' lives because the schools were failing, got together with a couple attorneys who worked pro bono and helped them form this brick and mortar public school. And now it's one of the top performing elementary schools in the York system. And not only that, they have a lottery to get there. And then it's not in a safe area of York City. I mean, it's the basic social demographics of that school district is 50% black, 40% Hispanic, 10% other. I mean, and the kids when you go to that school, you see the kids a safe learning environment and so forth. So I think we should be using those models to help all our public schools, because when we say that we have good public schools, what are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to other public schools in Pennsylvania, and how are we comparing to other public school systems throughout the United States? And then beyond that, are we comparing it to the international level? So when we're saying that we have these great public schools, it's sort of like saying we have a great football team and a bad football conference. I mean, they might really mop up inside the conference, but when it comes to the bowl game and they hit a tougher competition, they don't do as well. I want to make sure, as we move forward in the 21st century in education, that we are providing the best opportunity. And I think one of the problems are and that's why I'm personally against all these, and this is maybe a little off subject, but these state testings. I mean, PSSAs, and so much emphasis is put upon that, and now we're going to be trying to do these keystone exams, which I think is just another that we're going to be teaching to the test, and rather helping our students develop conceptual thought, we're teaching them how to memorize so that a certain percentage of those students pass, and then we think that we're doing okay. The rest of the world's learning conceptual thought. Our students are learning how to memorize, and then when they get out there, employers especially come to me in all areas, not just the Philadelphia area, saying, hey, we're not ready. And I had a college professor who came to me on a QT, and I promised I would never use her name because she didn't want to be ostracized in her educational environment, that it's not good, the students that she's seeing coming in as a freshman professor. And these are students not just coming from Philadelphia. So when we're saying that we're having these great public schools outside, my question is, what are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to ourselves, or are we trying to climb to that highest level and making sure that our students have at their fingertips the best opportunity to be competitive, not only on a statewide level, but on a national level and an international level? That's my goal, because again, if it's about the child, please, let's make it about the child.
And if I could add 2 points to answer.
Did you know that the Lincoln Charter School is not making it a yearly progress?
That was, I didn't know that.
I think,
According to the PDU website.
Well, I would like to check that out, because not all facts and figures are factual. All I know is when I visited there 2 years ago at a hearing, they were doing very well. I'm not saying they were the top performing school in the state. I'm just saying that they were the worst performing school in the York system. And now, if the school was failing that terribly, then why are people why do they have a waiting list to get students into there?
Nick, can I add just to answer your specific question, 2 things. I think the reality goes back to 2 things. One, this isn't going to cure everything.
Exactly.
And the second is participation rate. You know, I think that's why the cost is, when it gets blown out of proportion to $1 billion, they're using a participation rate. Kids that will actually take the voucher is not a realistic participation rate. I mean, I've talked with moms that have come to Harrisburg and can't afford an alternative and desperately want to see their son or daughter go to a safe environment. So there are parents out there that are, whatever you want to call it, I call it trapped in these locations and in these school districts, and they want out. Unfortunately, it's not 80 or 90%, because every parent if they see the statistics of Philadelphia, should want to utilize a voucher to get to a safe location. If it saves 10% or 15%, I'm okay with that. And I hope that parents, then other parents get encouraged by the parents that have chosen to participate in the program. But unfortunately, that's why the participation rate won't be 30, 40, 50%. And I hope that if we save 10% of the kids, we passed a good bill.
And also, I want to say one thing as far as these neighborhoods go. I mean, these kids, just because they're, they live in a neighborhood that, that might not be up to par, the bottom line is you put some competition in those systems where right now, the problem is some of these, we've given up on these kids. We've given up on these neighborhoods like, oh, they come from bad families, it's a parental problem, it's a family problem, it's a social problem. I don't buy it. If all of a sudden you have students going to leave your school and go to another school, it has been proven that they start doing a better job. They start getting rid of, teachers that have been there who have this attitude that they can't learn. I'm just gonna sit here and collect a paycheck. I'm not against teachers, but that does happen. So if there's a mechanism for competition, it will, if they know that if they don't perform, that kids are going to leave their school, they're going to perform better, just like you would in the private sector.
The Pew Foundation does have a study on Philadelphia, actually, and there is more choice that they determine in public schools now than there were before charters. There's some specialized programs in the high school that they never had before. They didn't make evaluation of the success necessarily of the charters versus the publics, but they did point out that for robotics, for the arts, there's specialized schools, specialized programs for those kids that did not exist pre-charter.
I just wrote a letter to the editor.
That's what that comes out.
Saying how proud I was of a public school in my district because they started their own cyber school program. This is suburbs of Pittsburgh, and it's a pretty good public school. And they started a cyber program because they're seeing the competition of the cyber education, the 21st century education. Instead of trying to thwart parental choice or trying to, well, first of all, I think they're here to stay. I think cybers and charters are here to stay. And it's finally the public schools are saying, well, we got to compete. Public schools are starting charters. Public schools are now starting cybers. I think that's only going to continue. But where is that really slow to happen? Where parents can't afford to drive their kid to school. They can't afford the computer or the internet to have cyber education. That's happening in those inner cities where those school districts have a monopoly. In Beaver County, they don't really have a monopoly because you have charter cybers, and most parents can afford a private education if that's what they want to pay for. But in the inner cities, it's a monopoly. Why else does Philadelphia have 500 people making over $100,000 a year?
That's a lot. And we just had that scandal this summer where $1 million, $1 million. Do you know how many kids could have gotten a voucher on that $1 million that one woman took? When I read that, I just thought, my goodness, that could have saved.
And did you read the article? Actually, it was an op-ed that she put out yesterday. She's endorsing the Opportunity Scholarship Act and saying that education reform needs to come from the outside and not from within. So she has totally changed her tune now.
Same as the superintendent of Washington, D.C. schools.
That's right.
Understands that parents should have the opportunity.
And I think good teachers, and there's so many of them out there that I think are just as frustrated as anybody in this scenario, and God love them, and I mean that, would thrive under this scenario because parents would choose them. And parents, I can think of, oh my goodness, my son and daughter are friends with an outstanding math teacher that teaches in the Cornwall London School District. I tell Shane I use him a lot because he's tops, man. He's fantastic. He would, under my system, he'd thrive and such because I would gear things towards, our to those teachers starting out, you know, rather than having this blanket across the board salary. I think one of the big major problems, and everybody's afraid to talk about, is the 800-pound gorilla, and that's called the PSEA. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to talk about that, and that's the Pennsylvania State Education Association, and they're afraid to talk about it. And I think now that they've joined with the AFL-CIO, I don't see where their agenda is truly about the child anymore.
It's not about the teacher either.
It's right.
Unfortunately, it's not about their employees.
And I think they've gotten way out of control. Hey,
can I one thing about that really aggravates me is that the governor asked teachers to take a pay freeze, and a lot of teachers did the responsible thing, and a lot of union members did the responsible thing, and they took a pay freeze. But why do they have less money in their paychecks now? Because their union dues were raised by 13%. Because they wanted to spend $7 million to beat the two of us to come to Harrisburg and defeat parental choice. I wish they worked as hard on mandate relief as they do to try to defeat parental choice.
Hey,
and that's my problem. I care about the teacher in my district has less in their paycheck that did the right thing, and their union turned around and raised their dues.
I hold education roundtables, and I try to get superintendents, I try to get parents, I try to get people there, and some have better attendance than not. But I remember the very first one we had, and we had a parent. We had a teacher there that said, well, the schools they ferret out the bad teachers and so forth. And again, this is not about attacking teachers, but this is what came out of that roundtable. But the parent says, well, if that's true, then why every year when I send my son, when I take my children to the first day of school, they tell you, well, you don't want Miss Jones, or you don't want Mrs. Smith, or you don't want Mr. Arnold, you know, you want to stay away from them, and they're there year in and year out, and all the parents know who they don't want to, hope you don't get them, I hope you don't get that. And my question is that, I think this is a thing that I think across the board we need to be looking at. I mean, and again, going back to the PSEA, I think they gravitate to the lowest common denominator, and they protect those that maybe shouldn't be in teaching, and they don't help those who are teachers. Shane Thomas, who's the math director at the Cornwall London School District, there I said his name, all right, and I'm proud to say his name. He should be making the top of his field financially. I believe in that. There's nothing wrong with paying a teacher a good salary. That's not going to break the taxpayer's back. You're going to get real value out of that. That's what you're going to get, and we need to be focusing on those areas. Like, as I said, as we're going into the 21st century, and nothing against gym teachers, please. I don't, but I'm just using this as an example. Why couldn't someone get a gym credit from the YMCA or be playing a specific sport? And why would a gym teacher be making more than someone teaching physics? Someone teaching calculus, someone teaching something else, and allow our superintendents and allow those who are managing our school districts to manage them like their own business, and stop these, again, I'm going back to my unfunded mandates again, but I hate it, and because I know it hurts our schools, and I want our schools to be as a competitive learning environment as possible, allowing our teachers, they're going to school to be professionals, allow them to be professionals. And trust in her. And if our districts aren't doing it, okay, then we say, okay, we need some changes here. That's fine. There has to be accountability and transparency. There's all of this.
I know that. I think one. You need to get.
I do, but
scooting.
It's a good question. It's a good question. Can I tell you what I think isn't reality? Is that 97% of teachers are getting, when they get evaluated, 97% of teachers are getting a good evaluation or an excellent evaluation. I don't think that's realistic, and I think we need to change and reform our teacher evaluation system. I don't think the House gets elected every 2 years. We don't have 97% good legislators. I just think we need a better way to evaluate, because I don't know. Because it's too hard to find out, because everybody's getting, 97% of them are getting good evaluations.
The PSSAs can be used to see value add. No one wants to do it, and no one wants to talk about it. I know you said something about standardized tests, but the data from there can look at value added. In other words, even if you get a class full of 90 90% students performing at 90s, how much value does that teacher add?
Yeah, but the question with the the salary part about the PSSAs is this, is that have they really gained knowledge, or are they regurgitating what they, or retain what they learned previously? And how does that really test as far as the growth of the student? I want to look of what is, I want to know how the growth of the student is. Now, for instance, let me be devil's advocate. Now I'm going to defend some teachers that are in some really tough scenarios in the public system. Let's say you're in like Lebanon School District, and let's say you've got Jose. And Jose just came over from Puerto Rico. And Jose's 10 years old. Now in Puerto Rico, they have public schools, but it's not mandated. It's not mandated for them to go to school. So maybe Jose never attended a day of school in his life. And now he's 10 years old, and he comes into the Lebanon School District, and they put Jose in the fourth grade. Now, according to the PSSAs, he's got to beat that fourth grade reading level of whatever that is, or in math level and whatever other the subject scores are, to keep the story short. But he's not. But let's say that teacher, that fourth grade teacher, through all his having to learn English, and so forth, takes him from a 0 grade reading level to, let's say, a 2nd grade reading level. That teacher's been very successful in my
But you can't tell them no child left behind, because the testament is not.
And I'm with you on that one.
So, see, and here's my argument. I keep saying, because I want to hear the school choice perspective. I'm not sold on it. I think there are other ways we could improve education without ripping out this whole section of roadway, we get the potholes, I think no child left behind. And you were talking about why, and we see it every day, why students aren't coming to college prepared, because no child left behind it ignores the science of statistics. Your student achievement is developing. 10% are going to achieve no matter what age you're in. 10% aren't going to achieve no matter what you do.
Right.
Everybody else is somewhere in the middle. What's happening is it's statistically impossible that every student in the country is going to be proficient in that career. It can't happen. It's statistically impossible.
And you know what? You're right. I'm sorry.
That's right. And I think the better alternative is vouchers. And I appreciate the competition argument. I don't think people want our public education system, because in a business environment, when competition and company improves, it's because they have control over raw goods that they make their product.
Yeah, but it's working in colleges, universities. There's competition there. And look, and it's a big business, man, because they come crying every year for more and more money all the time.
Colleges can choose to not accept students.
Well, that's true. And that's,
Public schools can't choose to not accept the students.
But as we move forward, now we're going to get into an arena of, and we don't want to go there, for alternative education and so forth. Again, at the beginning, this is not the voucher system. Is not the silver bullet.
We've tried everything else.
It's not the silver.
I mean, we've tried.
We disagree.
We spend so much, I guess where I'm looking at it as, here I am, a mom, a taxpayer in Pennsylvania, and I see this working in other parts of our country. And, I'm reading the statistics, I'm reading the sources, and I don't understand why we can't try it. We already have a system. Some schools are so bad in our state that we have spent so much money that now I think it is time. We can thank Ed Rendell for spending all that money to prove that spending the money doesn't make it better. So at this point, I think we really need to give it a look, give it a try. And I think it's important for, where we stand with the legislation, as far as, where we think that it's going to go. Have you heard anything from the Senate side?
Well, no, we haven't heard anything about that per se. I mean, we haven't, to be honest with you, my son is coming out a little bit. We haven't talked too much about anything, to be honest with you. And I apologize for that. That's not my fault, but anyway, I wish we could have a little more debate going forward. Now, I understand that there is discussions now with the governor's office, and I understand Senator Cole is working with that and so forth. I haven't heard anything yet per se. Jeff gives Senator Cole keeps on just telling me wait and see. But going back to your point that you said we haven't tried everything else, does that involve more money?
No.
Because now that I'd be interested in hearing,
I would offer an
but
alternative that I think would actually put more dollars in classrooms than it would in red tape and administration.
oh, you got my interest on that one too.
I understand the history of the state. I understand we're 200, 300-year-old commonwealth public education. We used to have it. Education is an interesting business because it was built from the bottom up as a population grew. We used to have a one-room schoolhouse. We had 20 kids in that town, and they were go through. As you got more and more population, you had more and more kids. We got a lot of kids now, more than teachers we have. We have principals who built this way versus companies who start small and then add employees and et cetera. There was a time when to drive from Elko School to Folmer School was a day's horse ride. And so it made sense to have Elko School District to serve those kids, and Folmer School District to serve these kids. I think that is part of the antiquated system you referred to earlier. It's a 19th century model that's not necessary. I think if you consolidate school districts, I'm baffled. There's 500 in the state. I don't know where you're going to go.
64, we had 1,201.
I know, and that's a consolidation. I don't know where you put it.
But look what that gets. Look, I agree with on so many points, but think about this. Look where we went. We went from 1,200 some school districts down to 501, and look where the spend education went. It didn't go backwards. It didn't even hold steady. We outstripped the rate of inflation compared to population growth by 3, 4, 5, 6 times over that time frame. So that first, which we dropped them in half, more less than half. Well, now I think we're down to 500 school districts. So, you know, while I can see that argument, I'm looking at history of saying, wow, the first consolidation didn't save any money, that's for sure. And now we're having kids on buses all day long, traveling from whatever in the most outlandish bus routes I've ever seen. Ineffective, not cost effective whatsoever. But that's another
It's something we
discussion.
can look- it's
That's
something to
just the
look at.
geography of the state. That's not going to change whether you have one school district or 500 school districts or 1,200 school districts.
Like
Some people live in very rural areas.
Didn't the legislative commission a study on the consolidated schools a few years ago, and the legislative budget finance committee came out and find that larger districts spends more money per student than consolidated.
You go to the state of Maryland, and I know this when you go to the state of Maryland, they have county school districts, and you see the inner layer of bureaucracy that has been built up in those huge consolidations that they did. They're not saving anything. There's no way. That bureaucracy grew so out of control. Now, I think if you're going to really help our schools,
Are they spending the money in administration, or are they spending the money in higher education?
I don't know. I was just trying to sell them tires.
Okay, so that your classroom sizes stay at 15 to 18, which above all other things is proven to improve the educational process in the classroom, because the students are then able to get individualized instruction, which they can't do in the classroom of 27 like this in the first grade classes. It's impossible. But we're so focused on teaching the test that it doesn't matter what the individual kid needs. I think
I'm with you.
school districts do this.
I think it's good for the discussion. I think that, you know, as
But
far
this-
as, I'm open, you know, we want to help these kids. I don't think that we should have an either or. I think we should have, there's nothing, so maybe that's the case, but we can't say vouchers is no. I want to say, let's do a voucher.
There's no point about
Like,
this.
we need to be
That's what choice
open-minded.
would help. Look, choice is not going to be, the biggest fear comes from the union. Because we're attacking, and I understand why, because we're attacking their cheese. I understand that we're taking away some of their cheese, and they're fearful of that. And their whole goal is to make sure that they are taking care of their dues-paying members and so forth and whatnot. I understand that arena. I don't think it should exist, but that's the nature of that beast. But if you, what's the best way to help bring down class sizes? And then my final example, and then my final question comes back to this, the one I opened up with. What is wrong with me as a parent to allow me that choice outside of the fact that I have to move and sell my home or put a lot of out-of-pocket personal money into that arena? And I can choose everything else in this country what to do. I can choose what university or college I want to send my son or daughter to. I can choose just about everything. Like I said, I'm a pro-life guy, but we can choose death. But we cannot choose where we want to send our child to school. And I have not found one person to give me a really good answer on that. If you tell me why, as a parent, I should have that right to send who I think I'm responsible for. I'm the one that's responsible for my child's education, not the state of Pennsylvania. I am. It's my child. It's not the state's child. And I know in the battles that I have with public education, with my son, which they messed up on because they missed a learning disability, that I had to find out for myself, out of my own pocket, and had to do battle with them. They don't want, my biggest complaint about some of them, I'm not saying all the schools here, but some of the, in my own personal battles that I had, was that they wanted me, my support, as long as I agreed with everything that they were doing. As soon as I countered that, I was filled with a room full of quote-unquote experts, and that I didn't know anything about my son. And that was, to me, insulting. So I believe as a parent, and it's my child, it's not the state's child, it's my child. It's not the state's child yet, right? We may be heading in that direction, I don't know. But it's my child. And again, I look around the world, and I see a country like Belgium, who has gone to school choice with their failing schools that they were having, and now they're thriving, and they're kicking our butt. A little country like Belgium, who doesn't spend nearly what we spend on their GNP, on our students. So, I mean, again, I don't think this is the mass uprooting. I don't think we're ripping up the highways. Well,
do they give the teachers a lot?
hey, I'm with you on that. And you know what? We can have full choice and still get rid of the teaching to the test.
And then adding the Keystone exam, I don't understand that.
I was the only no vote committee by that.
And now the Keystone exam, not every school district is implementing, you know, but they're doing it in my school district, so I know that that's going to be a problem that as a parent, but again, it's up to me to now get involved and say, hey, why do we now have this Keystone exam that's going to prevent your kid from getting into the right math class? I could go on and on and on, you know, but I understand what you're saying as a parent about teaching to the test, but I don't think that that should then end the discussion on vouchers. I think they're two different discussions.
I would agree with you. My concern with vouchers is that it's such a radical change to what has been done.
That's why I would suggest baby step.
Well, and I think working within the current system, but changing the structure of the number of school districts in the state, changing the level of administration of PE has got to be huge because they've got 500 districts to manage. And I think you.
I understand that, and I agree with you.
Put it in the box. Because the only way you're going to change classroom sizes, I mean, you've got the same number of teachers in the state, and you've got the same number of students in the state. Shifting from one room to the other will kind of level it out a little bit, but it's not going to drop the class size. You put more teachers in more classrooms, and you've got more. I mean, my wife is the only 8th grade English teacher at any local English district. One, all the way down. She's got 28 kids in her class.
And I see,
Actually, I think 29, but she's got a class where she doesn't have enough desks for all the kids in her class because they built a new school with 20 desks and said they would never go above 10 yet. Here they are.
and see, see, we can address that and also not exclude the conversation of the voucher. I guess, you know, I think that there's a lot of things and we shouldn't, you know, exclude one whole thing as bad without trying it. But, you know, the classroom size thing it is a problem. You
Vouchers
know,
may be the only thing that sort
the
of
school
the
district
urban
size thing might be a problem, you know, but with something, we can look at all these things.
You had your hand up about
Yeah, I
5
have a
times.
question for you, actually. Why do you believe it's radical to give a voucher to a child who is trapped in a family school?
because it's completely different from the way the system is working. The same. And my experience in business and otherwise is anytime you have a significant change in the way things are operating, there's going to be
Look at the rooms.
resistance to that change. There's going to be ineffectiveness until the system works out properly.
Look at what happened in New Orleans.
But how is giving a parent a choice radical? I mean, I just keep on coming back to,
I'm not saying you
I birthed this child, you know, I think nobody else knows what's better for my child than myself and my husband. So, you know, personally, I really don't like the fact that the government can tell me where my child should go to school, and I would love to see universal choice. I would love to be included the government is telling me where my child goes to school because it depends according to my zip code. I may not be able to afford Catholic school for all 4 of my children. So the government is telling me where my children go to school right now. And I think that is radical.
The government is providing you with an option if you don't have the wherewithal to see your kids to private school.
But we made that so burdensome today that we have 2 household workers just to make ends meet. And to the point where I know my daughter would choose another scenario. I know she would, but they can't afford it. And they can't afford to move from where they are, because she's trying to be an at-home mother of 3, and she's trying to do her job there. But we've been so burned, our tax burdens have become so great that we have basically forced 2 household earners to just make ends meet. There's where we are today.
And that's exactly it. And the other point is, we have, Anastasia and I have had conversations with the PSCA, and we have asked them directly, what is it then? If vouchers, if the RP scholarship does not work, what's the solution? And the only answer that we've had from the president of the PSCA and from other folks, you know, who work closely with the president of the PSCA is more money. Well, guess what? We've been pouring more money into this failing system for 15 years. That has been the solution. We have to stop at some point. We can't continue the madness. Well, and who are we going to ask? I mean,
And we need to get, you know, and again, as a citizen, you know, we need to have more people running. We ran a bunch of people for school board. You know, if you have people that are going to hold, the school board's going to hold this school district accountable.
What they did to you, they built a
They
school
have to
for
do that.
20 yes.
You know, and that's, again, being a good citizen.
However, one of the ways to fix bad schools is to not have to do anything.
I see, I mean, and we.
And I see them, I do.
I do see your logic.
There are so many, particularly the school board, single issue candidates that run because, oh God, you're not going to raise my property taxes. They got no business.
Well, actually, they have changed. Those guys have been running as much as some school board members have. And I don't even talk to me about the school board association, because I went out there at war for them. I stuck my neck out for them with Senate Bill 12 of the furlough bill. And they left me hanging to dry. Oh, it's a great bill, Folmer. Go with it. Bam. As soon as they got pressure from the PSCA, and to me, the SBA, the School Board Association, and the PSCA, they might as well be kissing cousins, because I see the same. I see the same scenario. So they left me hang out to dry on that thing. I still think it was right, and I think school districts would have to do.
And again, I hope that the legislators that are involved, you know, don't give up, and you know, we continue to try things, and you know, and I know that I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. The furlough bill I thought was an excellent bill. And, you know, we need the political will in Pennsylvania to have the courage to get things done. And if that means that you're going to stand in front of something and stand for something, we will applaud you. We will applaud you at the voting box. We will be your champions, you know, because we have a very activated citizenship these days. People are paying attention. And I think it's important for all of our elected officials to know that when you do the right thing, and, you know, we see the efforts, and, you know, we're looking for people that will, you know, stand out and stand up. And, you know, I see that in you, and I want to thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And as we wrap this up this evening, do you have a question, Rose?
Sorry to ask so many questions.
No, Rose, I'm glad you did.
I feel like I need to learn all I can, so that when it comes before us, I can make an informed choice. About transportation. We didn't talk about transportation. How's that covered? You decide to send your child to another school.
Within 10 miles, yes.
It has to be within 10 miles of the school.
It's currently that system.
If they want
now.
to use that school bus scenario. If it's outside that, you as a parent would be responsible to get that child.
Okay, so the school would have to transport the child to the other school?
Just as it is now. If I want to send my kid,
Transportation is not mandated, correct?
if a Catholic school, if the district provides it already. The way it is right now, it's within 10
The
miles.
parents, they're getting there, whether they're using the subway or the buses that they have in the Philadelphia system or whatever. I think they have student costs or whatever that they use there. So whatever it is, I know my, you know, and I know some parents that they get up and they took their child all the way over to Lettuce. Now they spent out of pocket to go to Lettuce Christian because they want to go to the public school system.
Yeah, there's no mandate for the the school district has to collect information on.
Yeah, so, but, go ahead, sorry.
No, but I do think that, you know, if there's any other questions like that, you know, again, we're waiting to see what the language is going to be. And it could be a really watered down version. It could be a really strong version. I just want to keep the conversation going. And this is with all, you know, school choice is a passion, you know, but there's other things in our government. And, you know, I think it's important that we move things along. And, you know, we have champions such as, you know, that's willing to put his neck out there and stand for something, even if you disagree with this. You know, I'd rather know, a lot of times I feel like politicians will hide in the shadows and not wanting to make a decision either way because they don't really want us to know what they stand for.
Yes, sir.
Given that the bill moves forward in some way, what are the baby steps for implementation?
As we move forward, the original goal, I thought SB 1 was really a baby step. I'll be honest with you. It was to deal with the 144 failing schools, which would primarily be urban scenarios, which is where it really needed to be addressed because we were already dumping a lot of money into those scenarios for that failure, for that brokenness. Maybe failure is too strong, right? For whatever term you want to use for that arena. So it will be some form of that arena. And so.
And that determination is done by?
That will be.
In the language of the bill.
Of the language of the bill, and who the leaders of the caucus can agree on to see if they can get a vote. Because again, anything done in the Pennsylvania State General Assembly, here's the magic formula: 26, 102, and 1.
Will the statistics be something that's public statistics, or will the State House send a team into the failing school districts and have an on-site?
I think we already know where those are.
Bottom 5%.
What's that?
It was bottom 5%.
Yeah, bottom 5%. Yeah, we already identified that. And
So they're already defined?
Yeah, it's already
Yes.
defined. So that we know where those are. But what we're hoping to do is with the voucher system going in on a baby step level and then expanding the EITC as we go forward. Because that has been very successful and has given corporations a chance to get some tax breaks, plus has been giving parents an opportunity. It doesn't pay for all their tuitions, but it sure pays for some of them, and some of it anyway, and it's very helpful. And for those parents who want to choose that arena, and again, just as an American who loves liberty and freedom, I don't get it. I mean, public education, and this is for your French audience. Back in the early 1800s, there was a French historian who traveled throughout the United States. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. And as he traveled throughout this great new nation that popped up on the face of the earth, he made all these observations about who we were. And one of the observations he saw early on was here was a nation, this brand new republic, that came flying onto the face of the sea, took on the British Empire, and started out on its own. And he took notice that here was a nation that the majority, the literacy rate was astounding. Because when he would contact, even if he talked to the farmer or the common person, they understood why they were free. They didn't care much what was going on in Europe, but they could tell you in detail why they were American and what the Constitution meant for them, because they were reading the Federalist Papers, which now our law students think are so hard to read, but they were for the farmer, for the common person. You know, and I think he was so surprised because he came from France, which at that time had a population of around 25 million people, but less than 500,000 people could read and write. So here was this new nation that the vast majority of the people were literate. Education is such an important part of America and its tradition and its future that regardless of what side we are on this, that we better make sure as we go forward that we put the child first, and then finally maybe go back to history and say, what has happened to our education system? Because let me point out, one of the authors of the Federalist Papers was John Jay. Now, John Jay, when he attended King's College, which is now Columbia University, one of the portions of his entrance to attend King's College at age 14 was to translate the first 10 chapters of the Gospel of John from Greek to Latin. and that was just to get in. Now, when I go, I'm looking, where have we gone? Now, I realize, you know, the land isn't, but the times change and so forth, don't get me wrong, but we think we're so sophisticated today. We think we're so, because we have all this technology that does all these things for us, and I think we've lost something. I think that's another aspect of what is our real goal. And for me personally, and then we're gonna have to close, I wouldn't mind seeing the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, just go away. I don't think they have any business in education. We wouldn't have No Child Left Behind. And I think education is a state-to-state issue, and it should be within that arena. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening, and for those who are watching, thank you for watching. And I know we've had a spirited discussion, and the beautiful thing about America is that we can have these discussions in a peaceful setting, and that we can agree to disagree. I always part on this note. You know, if you agree with me 51% of the time, support me, help me, get behind me. If you agree with me 100% of the time, you ought to have your head examined. So I'm just looking for, you know, just keep the debate going, and make sure that education is important. And I see the history of education. So we've got to make sure we keep this debate going, and so that we're improving the scenario for all Americans. So, hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.